All right. I think maybe a little housekeeping before we start as well. So we're so excited that everyone is here to chat about Regal and hear what we're doing in a little bit more detail. This is our first of a 4-week webinar series. So we're going to keep them vertical specific to really highlight, where we work well, what companies that we're working well with in these specific spaces. Today will be our insurance webinar. Also, over the next, I think, 2-3 weeks, if you're in Dallas or New York City or Utah, right outside of Salt Lake, we are having some in-person events. So please join us. The registration pages and links are on our website. We can also share those after our, meeting today. And yeah, we have some nice whiskey sommeliers coming in. We'll be sharing even more case studies and use cases for Regal. And out in Utah, we're doing a fun lunch and learn with some pretty unique food trucks. So again, if anyone's in those cities, please join us. We can't wait to see you all in person. But yeah, so to kick off today, if you're not joining us in person, you can join us virtually here. Please keep this interactive. If you guys have questions throughout, Wentz can kind of pop in and say who's asking a question or who's chatted a question, or we can go ahead and unmute you. So let us know as those questions come up. But welcome. Yeah, this morning we're going to be talking about Regal and what we're doing over here. So Regal is a contact center solution that is really created and driven towards outbound outreach and engagement. So think of your customers on the back end who have their own customers, where they have a team of people who are actively calling. So when we think about insurance, we're thinking about those agents who are actually the ones calling you to sell you the insurance or to go over some questions you might have had on their website, things like that. So that's the team that Regal was created for. And we're kind of going to go through why we're winning, how we're winning from that perspective. So when we think about what people are doing today from an outbound perspective, right? Traditional contact center platforms are all really focused on that inbound customer service, customer support. Regal is kind of taking that team, peeling them off of that and putting them in this solution that's really tailored to how can we drive conversions? How can we get people to pick up the phone more? Because what we found is, especially talking about solutions like insurance, people are trusting to talk to someone on the phone at the end of the day, even though we all think this digital world, everything can be automated or done through a chatbot. When it comes to these, higher intent decision-making or sales or things that you're going to purchase, like insurance, you actually do end up wanting to speak to someone throughout that process. So in today's contact centers, again, because they have a very solid inbound, they're using that same contact center solution to contact these people from an outbound perspective. So they might be dialing them all day long, or they have a list of people who, they know are looking at insurance or have insurance, and they're just calling them like at 8 a.m. and maybe 11 or noon, and then at 4, and they're just calling and calling and calling. So obviously, if you get a call on your cell phone that says spam likely or a number you don't know, you're not answering that. What are we doing at Regal? We're personalizing and customizing that outreach. So that phone call now says AAA insurance, right? So if I was just on the website for AAA, perusing around, looking at some claims or policies that I'm interested in, and then a couple minutes later, my phone rings with the AAA logo, I'm suddenly more apt to pick up that phone call because I was just doing something in relation to that. So really what we're doing at Regal, right, is figuring out how can we reach our customers better? How can we connect with them? How can we get them on the phone or really answer their questions, but specifically to what they were looking at or what they were doing, not a one-size-fits-all model. How can we take those conversations and convert them faster and more efficiently and effectively? And then how do we look at that and see what's working and what's not? So how can we test, was texting these people before we called them the best way to go? Or should we have sent an email directly after to follow up from our conversation? What's the best way for every individual person that we're touching to make sure that they become our customer? So first and foremost, really what you're doing, you're going into these customers and you're asking them, do you have a sales team that calls outbound? Do you have a customer facing team? Do you have any kind of outbound outreach? If the answer is yes to that question, Regal is a fit. And here's why. This is how you can get more into detail once you ask that initial, do you have an outbound team? Then you're starting to ask questions like, well, if you do have an outbound team and you don't have a specific technology that's working for them, what are you having some issues with? Are you having difficulty getting people on the phone? Do you need to increase those answer rates? Maybe you're just trying phone calls today. Again, that cold calling mentality, or just calling. That's not working. Have you thought about adding something like a text message into that outreach so it's more of an omni-channel touch? These things on the right over here are the problems that Regal is solving. Again, it's all going to be tied to revenue. So if you have a team that's driving revenue or carries a quota, how are they getting to those numbers? What are their goals? What are they struggling with to get to those numbers?
Mind if we go back one slide, Mandy?
Yeah.
Thanks. My name is Wenz. Met a few of you folks already in person. I'm on the business operations team at Regal. So a little bit of color on this particular slide is when you're talking to a partner, this is a very different kind of sale than like a traditional contact center or UCaaS sale. This is going to be very focused on a buyer who cares about holding a revenue line item. And so the questions here are designed to try to understand what is it as part of their sales strategy that they're trying to make significant improvements on. The most common ones, as Mandy alluded to, is increasing answer rates, increasing speed to lead, and improving that agent performance. But there's going to be a lot of different parts of that conversion funnel where a customer might have drop off, where Regal has features that we can speak to. And so the entire point of this is to really start to ask some of those leading questions around their strategies and how they're contacting leads to get a sense of that engagement there and whether we could be helpful. And if anyone from the audience has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to chime in. I'll be watching the chat board just to make sure we can address any questions along the way.
Yeah, Wentz, no, great points. I mean, looking at these, right, in an insurance workflow in particular, if someone has an insurance customer out there, and they ask them, do you have an outbound team? The answer 9 times out of 10, right? Probably 9.5 times out of 10, it's going to be yes. Where are their areas, or what might they come back with? Maybe some problems that are specific to insurance that they're having. Oh, Wentz, you might be muted.
Yep. So if you're asking me, if I'm asking a partner around specific problems, it could be, hey, I'm making 100,000 calls a month, and I have a feeling that a lot of those calls are not being picked up. Perhaps those calls are being marked spam likely. I want to get to the bottom of that. Maybe my answer rate is only 5%, which is, relatively, close to industry average. But if you think about it, that's a lot of missed call opportunities where you could be talking with customers. Few more examples there, but another one could be I don't know if I'm adding the right script to some of my calls. Maybe I need to A/B test and experiment more. I'm not using data to drive that decision-making process. But the idea is getting closer into the mind and heart of that manager who cares about revenue to hear what it is that they're trying to improve in their strategy.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So ideally, right, at Regal, we think that having our full solution is the Regal way. It's the best way. But we understand that this is a part of a team of the contact center. So we don't necessarily want to go in and just sell them the whole thing from end to end. We understand that we might want to start with, like what we said earlier, some of those different ways to see if we're going to drive revenue better switching to Regal. So again, that branded calling part where we're adding, their logo, their name to the screen when you're picking up, seeing how that's increasing the answer rates alone, or again, adding something like text messages. We can start over here in this connect path and see, are some of these ways going to drive revenue better and faster? We'll be able to tell that pretty soon. And then as the solution grows, as we see that we're driving some of these great conversions and higher answer rates, we can add different parts to the Regal solution. Again, this can be your full end-to-end. That outbound team can completely live in this solution. It's an open API into your CRM systems, and we work really well with the other system. We have lots of customers who keep, your traditional contact center solutions like your NICEs, your Genesis, your Five9s for that inbound team. And they peel those users who, again, are doing outbound off onto the Regal solution, and they will work side by side. So really effective, great ways to see, for your customers, hey, we want to come in and make a big impact, in the first 30 to 45 days. Why don't we try some of these things with Regal? See how we can immediately drive more revenue, which, right, that's going to be great for those teams, but also that's going to show the customer like, okay, you have this larger digital transformation project on the back. We came in and in a month, we're able to immediately drive revenue. Now, they'll come in and trust you a little bit stronger on some of the other projects that you're working with them. So in terms of our ICP, again, where does Regal fit? First and foremost, they have an outbound team. Again, if the answer to that question is yes, you're on the right track. If it's no, then transparently, Regal's not the right fit for this conversation. We're really big on what we just described, right? The land and expand, getting in there with a couple of things that we know will help the customer and then growing that Regal solution. We see that all the time. So maybe making a smaller commitment at the beginning for the first year, then growing into larger commitments as they see that this is really working. Because these are pieces of the contact center team, right? These are your outbound teams. These are your sales teams. We're looking for about 20 or more agents to that spot. To give you some ideas, I know we work with some large insurance companies that maybe have 600-700 seats. Maybe about 30 to 50 of those seats are actually the outbound team, to give you guys a ratio of sometimes what that looks like, especially in the insurance space. Again, Wentz mentioned it, we're working with people that carry a revenue quota. That's where Regal will resonate. That's where Regal will become extremely important because they're driving revenue pretty immediately. So think your VP of sales, people who are leading these teams, chief revenue officers. That's people who will want to have this conversation. So if you're starting in IT, totally fine. IT will be part probably of this conversation at some point, but maybe asking those contacts that you have, if they can make introductions to that outbound team, that would be the best place to start. Today, we're talking a lot about insurance, but on the next slide as well, we'll go over our verticals that we do the best in. And I think something really to note, right? This is a quick sales cycle. We think contact center, we think 6 to 12 months. Oh my gosh, it could be another 6 to 12 months for implementation. These are large projects. Regal is quick. You're talking like a 30 to 45 day sales cycle, also about a 30 to 45 day implementation of the whole solution. Again, we're working with smaller teams, but they have an immediate need, and this is extremely easy to implement in a lighter lift. So we get that team who's doing it. They have a personalized, customized solution that's working for them. It's up and running. So again, when you're going back to show that ROI of why you brought Regal in the first place to these customers, you're saying, oh, okay, well, we were able to show that. We were up and running 2 months after we started talking to you. Now we're starting to already see those answer rates, lifting. We're already seeing more conversions. We're seeing that revenue pretty immediately.
Right. And then on the IT versus like revenue stakeholder. So I'd say having been involved in a few of these partner conversations, what I've learned is that the IT stakeholder is going to be a critical part of the process. They are going to have to check off and be a part of that buy-in procedure, but it's typically that revenue holder that's going to drive the process forward and really prove out the ROI around whether Regal is going to show substantial lift for that customer in terms of answer rates, in terms of incremental revenue, in terms of the on-call conversion. Those are the things that that VP of sales stakeholder is going to care about, whereas the IT stakeholder might be able to think about some of the, I would say, like local optimizations, the smaller ones, such as just improving the answer rate alone, or maybe thinking about like their strategy around how they manage their caller IDs. And so that's just a little bit more information. If you are working with the IT stakeholder, it's the goal is to try to elevate that conversation into something that's more strategic rather than just a tactical piece of their calling strategy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think at the end of the day, we're looking at teams who are trying to get to people from an outbound perspective and they're having difficulty because as we all know, everyone is mobile. No one is answering a phone call that they don't know. I mean, I could be planning a party, for example, and like numbers I don't know, I'm not picking them up. It's literally people maybe I've texted before or someone that I know is calling me and I'm expecting the call. That's when I'm picking it up. So if you're working with these customers who do have, a high intent of a sales cycle, they're selling really large ticket items or very important items like insurance, healthcare, education, things that people really need to think a lot about. And they've probably done some type of research. That data that's coming in, that's where Regal fits. It's because it's taking in all that data and then customizing and personalizing those types of conversations that their agents are going to be having. So without Regal, what you have is, again, maybe we'll just try and reach someone and hope that they pick up the phone. What you're doing with Regal is you're saying, no, I'm pretty confident, maybe about 30% of the time versus that 5% of the time, someone's going to pick up the phone because I'm targeting them specifically with a customized conversation that I know matters to them.
And
So that,
then within insurance, just one more point. Sorry for interrupting, Mandy. Within insurance, I've found that the industry can be kind of broken out into like two different flavors of small individual agents that are not working within a centralized calling system, and then some of the larger organizations that do have like a centralized team all within one system. It is the latter that are going to be better fit for Regal, where you can bring them all into one umbrella and have kind of like a centralized dialer that powers everything behind the hoods. There are going to be a lot of insurance organizations out there that are smaller shops where perhaps every agent has their own like phone system and they kind of buy their own piece of a software. Those are not going to be great fit for Regal. We work really well in a centralized setting.
yep. Yeah. So to that point as well, again, these are the verticals that we work really well in. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be reviewing almost all of these, right? So today, insurance, we'll go through the rest of these, as we go on for the next couple of weeks. But I think it's really important if you're listening and you have customers that have an outbound team, or seeing some of these logos make sense as to why someone would be calling outbound, and you have those relationships. Regal is a big differentiator. No one else is doing this in the market right now. We believe that they will be doing it right soon. Outbound is going to become a lot more prominent, especially post-COVID. And revenue is always important. So, typically when you go into these contact center conversations, a lot of it is about cost optimization and cost savings. This conversation is specifically about driving revenue, making the business more money, which is arguably just as important, especially if they have these teams that are in charge and their whole responsibility is to do that. So with that being said, we're going to turn it over to Matt Benjamin. He leads our sales team here at Regal, and he's going to walk you guys through a case study specifically to insurance. So again, if you have questions, please ask them, send them in the chat, anything like that.
Great. Hi, everyone. So my name is Matt Benjamin. I'm the director of sales over here at Regal. And so in this portion of the webinar, I'm going to be highlighting a story from one of our more prominent insurance customers. And really the goal here is to make it clear who Regal's ICP is, identify the use cases where we're making the most impact, and really showcasing the real and immediate value that our customers see from our solutions. So just to introduce who Kin Insurance is, if you're not familiar, they're an insurtech company that was founded in 2016, and they specialize in direct-to-consumer homeowners insurance. So they've really had sort of a breakout last few years. In 2022, they were actually added to Forbes' next billion-dollar startup list. They're on pace this year to deliver $370 million in total premiums for 2023, and they just turned the corner to having positive operating income. Last September, they secured $33 million in additional funding to help drive the significant growth that they're seeing. So that's kind of who this customer is. And before I really get into their story, I want to talk about why they're such a good customer for Regal. So number one, they're selling a high consideration product, right? Buying homeowners insurance is not like buying Halloween decorations on Amazon. It's something that's very considered. And so they're also making a high volume of outbound calls. They've got a centralized call center team, which once just alluded to the importance of that. They're not individual agencies that are kind of spread around. They have about 120 sales reps making, I think it's around 300,000 calls per month right now. But one of the biggest factors, and one of the things that we haven't touched on a ton so far, is that they've made a significant investment in marketing their brand as well as digital and social marketing, which is driving all of these leads to their website and actually filling out forms. So the people that they're calling and all of their outbound efforts are really to folks who are raising their hand and saying that they want to talk to Kin Insurance. And this is extremely important for all of the solutions that we have, because this is the type of customer that we're really looking for. And I'll highlight that a little bit more as I go on here. But how we started talking to them really was in the beginning of 2022. And it was one of our BDRs who just reached out, and it happened to be good timing because they were trying to figure out ways to really supercharge their sales efforts. Who we were working with was, that gentleman right there, Michael Rose Sandow, or MRS as he likes to be referred to. And he is the head of sales operations, as well as their revenue operations team. And really the big problem they were facing at the time was, even though they had this high volume of leads that were coming in, filling out forms and saying that they wanted to chat, their outbound numbers were being marked as spam, or the leads just weren't answering because they didn't recognize the number that was calling them. And so all of the key KPIs that they were measuring were a lot lower than what they expected. So when we reached out to them, they were obviously very interested in the prospect of being able to brand the caller ID as well as remove the spam flags from all of their outbound calls. That's initially what they were interested in. And I'll talk about kind of what we're working on with them now, which is a little bit deeper than just this piece. But what happened was they were actually kind of skeptical about the solution at first. They hadn't really heard about branded caller ID before because it was brand new, something that didn't really exist, especially in early 2022. And they weren't sure if their low answer rates were due to the fact that consumers just didn't like talking on the phone, or was it really just an issue of them not knowing who was actually trying to give them a call? So what we did was we actually went through a pilot period. It was a paid pilot where we ran a basically commitment-free A/B test. And so we treated half of their outbound call volume, and then we left the other half of their outbound call volume as a control group where we didn't do anything, so that they could benchmark the results and really see side by side the effectiveness of the solution. And what happened was basically what you see on the screen. So the three big KPIs that they really were measuring was, number one, the 3-day assignment rate, which means leads that spoke to an agent within 3 days of lead creation. And that increased by 11% with the treatment group when using branded caller ID and spam remediation. The next one was the engaged call rate, or calls that lasted longer than 60 seconds. If it lasted longer than 60 seconds, then they considered that a quality conversation, and that went up by 36%. And that was even just within the first 30 days that they turned on our solution. And then the big one, this is that 7-day bind rate. And what that actually means is that that's a conversion rate. So these are leads that purchased a policy within 7 days of lead creation. And that went up by 8% by adding the solution. And it was literally as easy as basically flipping a light switch to be able to turn this on and implement it. So, really, if you break that down, if they're getting 100,000 form fills per month, even with a 1% conversion rate, that's 1,000 new customers per month without doing anything. When we add an 8% increase to that, that's an incremental 80 customers per month. And if you look at the average price of homeowners insurance, it's like $2,400 per year. That's $2.3 million in revenue for a solution that costs like $72,000 a year. And literally is as easy as flipping on a light switch in order to get that ROI. So that's kind of the impact that they saw initially. And obviously we've been working with their teams for a long time. And one of the big opportunities that we found was that their sales engagement process, just in general, had a lot of holes in it and a lot of different places where we could add value with more of our solutions. And so that's where our contact centers really come into play. And that's why they're evaluating it right now. And so their current process is really, they've got a huge amount of leads. They only have 120 agents who are working these. So all they're doing is calling them once a day for 3 days, and then they stop working that lead, period. So they've got a huge amount of leads that aren't being worked after that 3 days. They're basically just being put into email marketing and hoping that they come back. And then they don't have a way of actually prioritizing the high amount of leads that are coming in. And so these are the two sort of use cases that we've initially identified with them that Regal can help with. And so I know, Wentz and Mandy went over what our contact center solution can actually do for them. But basically, If I give you an example, our journey builder can customize the way Kin sales reps are actually interacting with each of these leads. So let's say 2 leads come in at the exact same time, and one of them says that they're trying to purchase a policy immediately, and the other one says that they want to purchase a policy within the next 6 months. Regal has the ability to understand that metric and what they said and actually treat each lead differently by making sure that the lead with the most imminent need gets a call first. And maybe the lead that has a 6-month timeline is getting an automated SMS to schedule a call for a later time, so that the limited number of sales agents that they have can always prioritize the highest intent, most urgent folks first, which will lead to a higher increase in conversions. Now, we can react to not only attributes that you know about those leads, but also the behaviors. So even if the standard is to call once a day for 3 days, but in that first call, you don't get a hold of them, but later that day, that lead goes back to the website and they start researching policies, start looking at things on Kin Insurance's website, we can actually trigger a call in that moment from a sales agent. So they're not waiting until the next day to call that person. They're calling them immediately when Kin is most top of mind for them. And that's going to lead to even further increased conversion rates, as well as answer rates and all of their main KPIs that they're measuring. We can do the same thing with all of the leads that are outside of that 3-day assignment period. So all of those stale leads, we can make sure that their agents aren't having to call every single one of them if they want to run a campaign against people who came into the funnel, a month ago or 2 months ago. They can just prioritize the ones that are showing high intent signals, and Regal can automatically surface those leads to their agents. So they're always calling the most high intent leads all of the time. So that's just an example of what we're working on with them today. This is pretty common in our sales cycle, where customers will start with branded caller ID and spam remediation, but then obviously have a need to want to improve things even further. And so that's when they really start looking at our contact center. Let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, Matt, that's great. I mean, just hearing it, right? The first thing you're hearing is they just turned on again some of those first introduction, levels, so to speak, with Regal, and saw a $2 million increase in revenue right away. So for them, right, again, think of your customers that you have, especially in insurance and things like this. Like, what does that look like for them to drive that kind of revenue? What else can they do now that they have that much more revenue? What other projects can come on board? And then, like Matt said, what we see all the time is, wow, this worked so well. I mean, you can see the percentages here. Okay, let's add some more parts to the Regal solution because we know it's working. We trust you. We've seen it work firsthand, and we just want to keep getting better. I think we have a question.
We do have a question, yes, from Marty.
All right. Do you want to read it once so that?
Yes. Marty asked, what is the #1 obstacle you see in selling this? Is it the disbelief in these numbers? How do you overcome these objections? Matt, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so it's funny. It's not so much an objection to selling it, but it's more finding the customers that are going to benefit from it the most. And so a lot of times we have to do a pretty deep audit into the sales process, where leads are coming from, to really evaluate where Regal or the branding and spam solution is going to make the most impact. We know that if the leads are coming through organic channels or paid channels, and they're very familiar with the brand and the website, that this is going to have a big impact. And so if customers are skeptical about this at all, then that's why we offer that test period. We wouldn't offer it a commitment-free test period if we didn't know that they will see basically immediate results, where a lot of solutions that you implement, especially that are tied to revenue, take months and months and months of iteration and implementation in order to make an impact. This is something that's absolutely immediate. And that's why we do that, because our test period to conversion rate is like 85–90%. And usually if it doesn't work out, it's either because the customer doesn't have a big enough volume or their lead sources are a little bit sketchy.
Great. And then we have a second question from Rich Charity. Hello, Rich. He asks, does the branded calling for outbound work the same way for Android and iPhone users? Meaning, does it have the same look and feel?
So it's very similar. iOS keeps updating and changing the way that things look. And so sometimes the branding shows up first and then the number, and sometimes it's the number, then the branding, and each iOS version seems to kind of change things up, but it's basically the same. And what's nice is it will show up on the call logs. It will show up on all smart devices. So if you've got an iWatch, you'll see the branding on there as well. So it's very effective across all devices. And the only big difference is the logo and call reason right now only works on certain Samsung devices that are on AT&T. So it's about 10% of cell phones in the United States. So we can change the caller ID to the alphanumeric characters of the business on all cell phones in the United States. But if you want like their specific like colored logo and a call reason, that's the newer technology that's still in beta right now.
Great. And then moving on to the next question, Tyler asks, Matt, you mentioned the ROI numbers for Kin. Can you repeat that financial uplift? So the ROI math that you used for Kin, you mentioned an average of $2,300 per year with an 8% uplift in conversion rate.
Yeah, I just took an example. I'm obviously not speaking towards their exact numbers, but we know how many leads that they have. We know what the average conversion rate is across most of our customers. So, I was just, assuming a 1% conversion rate on the 100,000 leads that they get. That's about 1,000 conversions per month. And then an 8% increase would be about 80 new customers per month. You multiply that by 12, that's what, 20 or what, almost 1,000 customers per year times the average of homeowners insurance right now. That's all I was doing. It was just a very simple calculation as an example.
Yeah, and Tyler, I think if we want specifics, we can go back and I'll send you offline like the actual numbers. We can grab that.
Yeah, but I think like the way Matt frames it is a really good way for thinking about how Regal positions itself. It's understanding what is that funnel, what are the key levers there that we can help to increase, and how that maps over to some of our feature sets, right? So being able to increase the answer rate, great. Now you have more conversations per month, and then you can increase the conversion rate those during those calls as well. So those are all like really big drivers that we can help impact. And then last question from Rich Parity. How many of your customers replaced an existing solution versus Regal being their first solution?
Yeah. So for talking about contact center, I would say the majority of our customers were replacing a solution, at least for that specific use case. So if it's a sales use case, like we've got bigger customers who kept their old dialer for the inbound stuff, like Mandy mentioned, but they just added Regal as a sales solution, something that's very common in B2B, but hasn't been so common in direct to consumer or B2C orgs until now. And then for branded caller ID, that's almost always a brand new solution. Every once in a while, someone's working with a vendor who doesn't cover all three carriers and they want somebody who can, and we obviously can. And so then we'll replace that solution so that they get more coverage.
Awesome. That's it for all the open questions. Thanks for all the engagement here.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So again, things like the ROI, the numbers that Matt went through, our team is definitely able to help you with that. So if you have some of these customers that fall right in these verticals and you kind of just want to get some more information on like insurance, what did that talk track look like? Like, what are some additional deeper questions that if we have these types of customers, we can go in and ask? We have those resources. We're definitely willing to meet, offline and go into that in more detail, or if you have specific companies you want to talk about. Again, we will be doing our next one next Wednesday is on healthcare. Keep me honest. So if you want to join us, they're going to be similar, but going through different use cases and different case studies. And then, yeah, if anyone on the call wants to schedule like a deeper dive or see a demo of the platform, we are open to doing that. So I think that takes us to our time today. This will be available also if you'd like to have the recording, so we can send that out as well. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Wentz, for joining. And we will talk to you all soon.
Folks, thank you.